Black billionaire man refused boarding on a cruise ship and humiliated by new racist ship captain. What happened next will shock you. Watch as things unfold and remember to share your views. Let's see what you think and how you would have treated this issue if you were the person involved. Have you ever been treated so unfairly that you wondered if the person humiliating you even knew who you were? Imagine walking up to the entrance of something you own, only to be turned away and degraded in front of a crowd. How would you react? The sun was shining brightly on the harbor, and the majestic cruise ship, the majesty of the seas, stood tall, ready to take passengers on an unforgettable journey. The new ship captain, Charles Hastings, was a man who took his position seriously, perhaps too seriously. He had been hired only recently, but there was something else about him. Rumors whispered that Captain Hastings didn't take kindly to certain types of passengers. But who would dare question a man in uniform, right? The real question is, what happens when someone challenges his authority? James Edwards, a black man dressed in an understated yet elegant suit, approached the check-in. He appeared calm and composed, but you could sense a quiet confidence about him. As he walked toward the desk, a few passengers gave him odd glances. Was it his skin color that caught their attention? Or was it simply that people have a habit of judging by appearance? The real shock, however, came when the captain spotted him from across the deck. With a sharp look of disapproval, Hastings began his approach. "Excuse me, sir, but we have standards here," Hastings said with a smirk as he eyed James up and down. "Are you sure you're on the right ship? Have you ever experienced a moment when someone immediately judged you based on how you look, not knowing your worth?" James raised an eyebrow, slightly confused. "Yes, I believe this is the cruise line I booked." But Hastings wasn't satisfied. "I'm not sure you belong here. Why don't you try the other side of the docks? This ship is for exclusive guests, and frankly, I don't think you'll fit in." Could you imagine being turned away, humiliated in front of strangers just because of the color of your skin? A hush fell over the surrounding passengers, all eyes now on this growing confrontation. James, still calm, replied, "I'm certain I have the right ticket. Why don't you check again?" Instead of complying, Hastings scoffed. "We don't have time to entertain frauds. You're holding up the line. Why don't you make this easy on everyone and leave before things get ugly?" How far would someone go to assert their so-called authority? The captain's voice was filled with venom, a thinly veiled layer of racism dripping from each word. James, unfazed, simply smiled. "I don't think you want to go down this path, Captain." The tension in the air was thick. Passengers murmured among themselves. Was this man really being denied boarding? And why? Hastings, sensing the eyes on him, doubled down. "Are you threatening me? I think we've had enough. Security. Could this get any worse for James? Imagine being treated like a criminal for simply trying to enjoy a cruise." As security arrived, the captain puffed his chest out. "Escort this man off my ship. He doesn't belong here." The guards hesitated, unsure. James wasn't causing any trouble. In fact, he seemed perfectly within his rights to board. But Hastings, in his arrogance, couldn't back down now. Isn't it ironic how some people feel so comfortable in their prejudice that they refuse to consider they might be wrong? James, still calm, finally pulled out his phone. "I think you should reconsider before you make a bigger mistake, Captain. Let me make a quick call." But Hastings was having none of it. "Call whoever you want. You're not getting on this ship." James dialed a number, and within moments, his tone changed. "Yes, please connect me to the CEO of the cruise line." Wait, did the captain hear that right? CEO? A few bystanders began to shift uncomfortably. Could it be that this man was more than what Hastings had assumed? But still, the captain's pride wouldn't let him back down. What would you do if you realized you had insulted someone far more powerful than you thought? Hastings crossed his arms, glaring at James, while security stood awkwardly, unsure whether to intervene or let the situation play out. James smiled again, putting his phone away. "You know, Captain, I don't think you know who I am, but you're about to find out." Moments later, a fleet of executives arrived, rushing toward the commotion. One of them, visibly concerned, hurried up to James. "Mr. Edwards, we had no idea you were arriving today," the executive said, panic in his voice. Hastings blinked in confusion. "Mr. Edwards, what was going on? Is there a problem here?" the executive asked, clearly trying to manage the situation. Hastings, now pale, stuttered. I was just following protocol. This man didn't look like he was on the list. How quickly can arrogance turn into regret? The executive turned sharply to Hastings. This man is James Edwards, the owner of this entire cruise line. He doesn't need to be on any list. What do you think was running through the captain's mind at that moment? The crowd gasped in disbelief. The same man Hastings had just humiliated and tried to remove from the ship owned the entire company. How quickly tables can turn, right? Now Hastings was visibly shaking. I didn't know. I'm sorry, Mr. Edwards, he stammered, realizing his career was on the line. Please, forgive me. I didn't mean any harm. But could an apology really undo the damage? James shook his head. I think it's time for some changes around here, starting with you. The executive nodded, and without another word, Captain Hastings was escorted off the ship by the same security guards he had called moments earlier. Talk about karma, right? James turned back to the crowd, many of whom were still in shock. Now, let's enjoy this cruise, shall we? He said with a smile. What lessons can we take from this? How many times do we judge people without knowing their story, their value, or their power? James had handled the situation with grace, but the sting of prejudice was still fresh. As the cruise sailed away, many couldn't stop thinking about what had just unfolded. And you? How would you have reacted if you were in James's shoes, or even in Captain Hastings? Let this story be a reminder. Never judge someone by their appearance, because you never know who they truly are. As the cruise continued on its journey, the atmosphere slowly shifted. Passengers began to realize that they were not just on a luxury ship, but in a vessel of opportunity and potential. As the evening approached, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow on the water. Do you ever wonder how a single incident can change the mood of an entire gathering? The passengers were buzzing with energy, sharing their thoughts about the earlier confrontation. Some expressed outrage at the captain's behavior, while others were just thankful they had witnessed a dramatic moment unfold. James, on the other hand, was unfazed by the previous altercation. He was determined to enjoy his time on the ship. As he moved through the crowd, he overheard snippets of conversation. I can't believe that man thought he could get away with treating someone like that, said one passenger. Another added, I'd have done the same if I were in his shoes. But how many would actually stand up to racism if they were in a similar situation? James decided to take this moment to engage with his fellow passengers. Excuse me, everyone, he called out, raising his voice just enough to grab attention. Can I ask you a question? Curiosity filled the air. What could this man, just moments ago a victim of humiliation, possibly want to discuss? How many of you have faced discrimination or prejudice in your lives? Silence fell momentarily, but then hands began to raise slowly. James's heart ached as he listened to their stories, each one echoing a painful experience. Thank you for sharing, he said. Isn't it interesting how we often overlook the struggles of others? How we get caught up in our own worlds, forgetting that everyone has a story. What would it take for people to understand the power of empathy? The conversations continued, and James became an unexpected catalyst for change among the passengers. The ship was not just a cruise, it was turning into a platform for dialogue, understanding, and even healing. As the evening progressed, the ship's crew organized a welcome dinner for everyone on board. People were seated at long tables, and the ambiance was filled with laughter and chatter. But behind the smiles, there lingered a question. Would there be an acknowledgement of what had just happened earlier that day? When the dinner began, the head chef, a jovial man named Antonio, made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to extend our deepest apologies for the earlier incident. We believe in inclusivity and respect for everyone, and we are committed to ensuring that this cruise reflects those values. James felt a wave of relief wash over him. Wasn't this what he had hoped for? Change begins with acknowledgement, doesn't it? He stood up, raising his glass. To a journey of understanding and unity. As glasses clinked together in agreement, the passengers joined in the toast, the tension from earlier seemingly dissolving into the ocean breeze. But would this moment of unity last? James couldn't help but wonder if the seeds of change planted during dinner would grow into something lasting.
If you've watched this far, comment which country you're watching from and leave a 100 in the comment section because you are type of person that likes to finish what they started. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to get notified whenever we drop new videos. Now back to the story.
As the night wore on and people danced under the stars, James couldn't help but reflect on his journey. What was the real lesson here? Sometimes it takes a moment of humiliation and a confrontation with prejudice to ignite a spark of change. With the ship docking back at the harbor, passengers exchanged contact information, promising to stay in touch and continue the dialogue. Will they follow through, or will this be just another fleeting moment of unity? As James prepared to disembark, Captain Hastings approached him one last time. "Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I've learned more than I could have ever imagined. I hope you'll stay in touch." James smiled. "I will, Captain. But remember, true change requires ongoing effort and awareness." As they parted ways, James looked back at the ship, now a symbol of transformation. What happens next? How far can one experience ripple out into the world? Would they all carry the lessons learned from their time aboard the Majesty of the Seas? As James stepped onto the dock, he felt hopeful, determined to continue advocating for justice and understanding in all areas of his life. After all, isn't it our responsibility to challenge the status quo and fight against discrimination wherever it may arise? As he walked away, he couldn't help but wonder, what if everyone took a stand against prejudice? How much stronger could our communities be? And how many lives could we change if we dared to listen and learn from one another?